We're talking about the 5 biggest industry trends for the cryptocurrency and DeFi spaces in 2023 with Alex Filatov. He is the CEO and co-founder of EverX. We'll be talking about his project and his predictions for what's next. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, David. Pleasure to be with you.
You and I had a chance to meet in Malta, but we didn't have a chance to speak there, which is unfortunate. So I wanted to follow up with you because you do have a very interesting presentation that affects everybody working in DeFi and crypto. Your 5 top Web3 and blockchain trends in 2022 plus and beyond. Starting with number 1, I like to touch on this one first because I think it's most relevant. More government intervention and regulation. In particular, you said the use of blockchain-enabled technologies. Tell me more about that. Why do you think we'll have more regulation going forward? And what type of regulation?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think the trend has been for more regulation, as we could see. We all remember the cases of SEC versus, some of the famous blockchains, and just overall, I mean, the SEC and some of the other regulators see this whole blockchain space as some sort of kind of liberal space that requires some securities laws to be applied and the other relevant technologies. I think the other big reason was this whole collapse of FTX Alameda. I think was a big shake to the industry, and what happened before in the year, where a lot of funds have been frozen, a lot of user funds, and basically that triggered 2 things. One is obviously more trends toward decentralization on one end, yes, and then for more regulation and centralized finance. So that's kind of one big piece, is that it's been historically the trend to count all the ICOs and IDOs and whatever, as a potential security offering, and the desire to regulate that.
Yeah, okay. Sure. Please continue, please.
Yeah. The other kind of big one is, I think, all of the governments around the world, and we see every day, we see news, are discovering, that, blockchain can be an interesting, enabler to bring central bank digital currencies, to bring blockchain-enabled use cases, be it, around identity management, around voting. We know some of the countries have been experimenting with that for a while, countries like Estonia or Georgia, more recently China, and I don't want to list all of them, basically. And I think the governments are discovering that there is something about that technology that can bring more functionality. If we talk about CBDCs, like, you can program the money and you can cater and enable more traceability with CBDCs. So it's kind of 2 trends. It's one is the desire to control decentralized space or centralized in our industry definition, and then the desire to embrace that technology to bring more programmability / functionality, and also more transparency and control into the financial system, and also cut costs as well, using that technology.
I want to, before we move on to the other 4, this is an interesting chart that I like to show. This is from your PDF that you sent me. You have a curve. I don't know if that's an adoption curve, or I'll let you explain what that is. So you have different phases on the x-axis: the innovation trigger, peak of inflated expectations, trough of disillusionment, slope of enlightenment, plateau of productivity. These are very colorful terms, Alex. Did you come up with this yourself? That's very good.
No, of course not. If I did, David, I would be a very famous person. No, I did not. It's a standard Gartner hype cycle thing that out there for maybe about 10 years. I first ran into this in 2016.
Okay.
I was kind of studying a little bit in the Silicon Valley, and I kind of liked it. It's basically what you have is on the vertical axis, you have expectations, which sometimes is referred as hype. And then on horizontal axis, you have time. So, it's interesting and so I didn't change it. I just took Gartner's, Gartner's chart from 2022, from the summertime, I believe. And indeed, you have interesting observations. You have, for example, Web3 is just this whole ownership economy thing is just climbing up there to the very top. You have ZKP being very close. You have decentralized exchanges over the top already, decentralized identity, which I don't fully agree, by the way. I think we still have to see the peak of decentralized identities, as ZKP identity solutions pick up, as the government start leveraging the technology. But I think it's an interesting take on the industry, so that's why I was using that.
Where are we right now in the x-axis?
Well, it depends on which which circle you want to look at. If you look at the layer two, we're right at the very top. If you look at smart contracts, we're basically almost down
Okay.
to trough of dissolvement.
Yes,
Uh,
disillusionment. Yes,
if
but
we look distribution, if we look at the metaverses are at the very bottom, basically at the innovation trigger. So yeah, it depends on which segment are we talking about.
okay, so the broader crypto winter doesn't affect which phase a particular project or utility, if you want to call it that, is in the adoption curve. It
It
very
does. It does, of course. Of course, it does because it, it pushes some segments, like for example, decentralized finance. After what happened with, I think,
Mhm.
FTX was the biggest trigger. It pushes it kind of forward on adoption, and then it slows down some of the other things. So of course, the cycles do influence the trends. So this is a snapshot from about 6 months ago from Gartner.
I understand. Okay, so I want to talk about the metaverse here because that is the only one here with a yellow triangle, meaning that it will take more than 10 years to plateau. So it's very early, I would say, in its adoption curve. The term metaverse, I was at the conference with you at AIBC. It's one of those buzzwords. Everyone was talking about it. It's one of those things where the more I learn about it, the less I feel like I understand. Because there are so many different use cases for metaverses. There's so many different types of metaverses, different investment implications. Let's just focus on the investment implication angle. What does the metaverse actually mean for an investor? Do we already have metaverses? Are we about to see new technology that we haven't seen yet? Help us visualize the future, Alex.
Sure, of course. Well, first of all, I like the definition of the Andreessen Horowitz, one of the founders, who basically said that, well, look, let's try to simplify things because the other term is Web3, which is a new phenomenon, which the industry embraced, maybe started a couple of years ago and just really embraced this last year in 2022. So he kind of said, simplifying, if you look at Web3, you have four big components. You have the metaverse, which we'll dive into in a second. You have fungible tokens. You have non-fungible tokens, and the number four would be the DAO. So the whole governance aspect, which is kind of, it's really simple, but I like that. And if we want to dig into this a little bit deeper, I mean, I think everybody understands the fungible, non-fungible, and DAO aspect. The metaverse is the way I frame it, and I looked at different frameworks from different analytical companies looking into this. It's a combination of technologies that enables essentially the ownership economy. I think at the very center of the metaverse, you have the ownership component, which is something new. We if we talk about gaming, for example, you don't own really the items that you have in the game. With NFTs, you do. Um, so that's kind of one piece, is this whole ownership piece, which is at the very center of the Web3 phenomenon, and that's an important distinction of the metaverse. The second one is decentralized finance, is that within the metaverse you don't use regular banking, regular finance, but you do use decentralized finance, and you have the tokens enabling that, and all the DeFi elements. And then, of course, there are all of the other pieces like, VR, AR, MRs that come into this, and the social aspect of that. So for me, it's a mix of, if you look at Gartner, I think they have 12 components. So it's a mix of different things that basically create the new environment to socialize, to interact, to play and earn, play to earn, to own your assets, and all of the other components that are behind the metaverse. So that's kind of, for me, the framework, the way I look at it.
Okay, I want to come back to DeFi in just a minute, but first let's finish up on the metaverse. So I want to understand, Alex, the next big revolution in the metaverse space, because right now one can argue we already have the metaverse. If you play video games, if you play online RPGs, for example, you're already interacting with other people in a sort of virtual world, albeit be on your computer. If you're talking to someone virtually using an avatar, that's arguably a metaverse. People, when they think about the metaverse, they think about the Matrix. You sit somewhere, you
Sure.
plug yourself in to a virtual reality. That's the other extreme. But what is the next big step that can completely change our lives, both physically,
Yeah.
virtually? Yeah.
So if we move away from, the Octolus and all of this stuff that is kind of hardware related.
Yes.
So what's new is that it's blockchain enabled, which for me means a couple of big things, as I just mentioned. One big thing is the whole ownership piece, and the ability to transfer it, that you actually do own, for example, the different skins that you have, you can transfer it, you can sell it, etc., etc. So this whole ownership thing. And the second big piece is the finance. That the finance is not just Visa, Mastercard, and banks with all the downsides of that, but we do have decentralized finance elements in there as well, which means essentially, if needed, lack of KYC and AML, which I think is temporary, but still, right now you don't really use most of the DeFi elements. You don't have KYC and AML in there as you enter. So that whole anonymity piece, in a positive sense, anonymity piece in a positive sense. So that's kind of the second component, is the use of DeFi. And if we talk a little bit about the gaming angle, we could see recently how blockchain can change the gaming industry. It started with Axie Infinity 2 years ago, when it all went, big, and you had villages and in some Asian countries where, people were chipping in, and the best players in the village were playing and feeding the whole village, which is kind of, disruption of traditional industries. We could see it more recently with games like Steppen, which really brought, up to 1 million new users probably into the space. Some of it coming from the space, some of it coming from outside of the space, where just, a simple introduction of, of shoes being an NFT, essentially, and the ability to play and make money, brought a little bit of the revolution in there, where people were jumping in, to play and make money. Industry has to figure out sustainable tokenomics, which Axie Infinity could not really figure out, and Steppen could not figure out either. But I'm pretty sure that there'll be more utility, there will be more sustainability, and kind of the gaming piece, embracing the blockchain and play-to-earn mechanics, will be the third big component.
Okay, that leads to the other point, your third point, NFT utility cases, more NFT utility cases. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but when people say that NFTs are dead because transaction volumes on platforms like OpenSea are down 97% last year, is that true? Are NFTs dead?
Well, it's, again, we're looking at the Gartner hype cycle, when NFT blasted in, I think, really blasted in the spring 2021. We all remember that, when I know you could generate any collection.
Yeah, people were paying millions of dollars for JPEGs of rocks. I remember that. Yeah.
Rocks, monkeys, you name it, whatever, frogs, whatever was in there. And it's everybody could see that this was just a short-term hype. And it's, in particular now,
maybe long-term, but a lot of people like rocks, frogs, monkeys, who knows? But yeah, I see your point.
Of course. And now that you have technology like, Midjourney, I don't know if you tried Midjourney or some of the other stuff like that, where you could generate amazing collections in minutes, really, of any kind. It's just, it does not make sense. The future of NFT is utility. It has to bring the real utility component for people to make sense, access to closed events, access to particular clubs. The clubbing industry has been out there around the world for many years.
Yeah, can you explain that utility? Give us a utility in the entertainment industry something NFTs can do that nothing else can do. Why do I need an NFT ticket for a club or an event? What's wrong with a regular ticket?
There is nothing wrong with a regular ticket, and there are a lot of clubs out there. Again, in sports and academics, you have different clubs. Celebrities can have their own things. It's just NFTs bring again ownership, a more robust ownership component. They bring programmability. For example, talking the tickets, you cannot program the tickets. For example, FIFA has been struggling for years that people don't resell their tickets. I was just in Qatar, at the FIFA event, the World Cup event, and it's still not solved. With blockchain, you can
I see.
program the NFT that you can program resellability, you can program certain rules. If you want, you can build in royalties, etc., for musicians. For artists, it's a way to transcend a few intermediaries. For example, a famous artist can just, using the modern marketplaces, can issue his own tickets and do the concert in the metaverse, selling the NFT tickets as NFTs. And there are no producers, there are no intermediaries, there are no ticketing companies, nobody. It's just an artist and the user. I can continue.
Yes.
It's
It sounds like the big winners of the Web3 revolution, the big winners will be your cell phone providers, your data providers. We'll just be using more data with all these NFT transactions on a day-to-day basis. I'm kidding, of course. But I think,
you do have a point there, of course. But coming back to the utility, it's different kinds of utility. That's kind of one big thing I want to reinforce. And the second big one, I think, is corporations and big brands are discovering that NFTs for them is a chance to transcend intermediaries and cater directly to their fans. Talking the football clubs, for example, and the Starbucks, and it's like I don't want to list all of them. Playboy, all of them more or less tried in the last year with NFTs to a different degree of success. Many failed because they were Russian, I think, and not thinking enough about the utility, but it's just a start where they were started. So those are kind of two big things, corporations and brands discovering the functionality of NFT, and then the utility being more sophisticated as the industry develops.
Yes, very good. Well, the other point you've made is that there will be more experiments within DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, and social tokens. These are emerging concepts. So tell us about the utility of DAOs and social tokens.
Kind of what I meant with that point is a little bit a bigger point. I was with the whole Web3 phenomenon. Basically, we're seeing the blockchain-enabled technologies penetrating the space deeper. We did see many big, big media or social networks embracing NFTs or tokens or the blockchain. I'm talking Reddit, I'm talking Twitter, and many other ones, of course. We do see the rise of decentralized social networks. There are quite a few out there on different platforms. Then we saw innovation coming from for example, from Vitalik, who is Buterin, who is obviously a respected member of the community, with soul-bound tokens, etc., etc. Basically, my point there is that we'll see, like we saw before, when people started experimenting with NFTs, starting from, I think CryptoKitties was the first one back in 2017. I remember when I bought my first couple of kitties in November 2017. I think that was pretty much the first NFT use case. And then with DeFi, when it started 3 years ago, and I think a lot of people did not take it seriously, and then it blasted into there were $100 billion industry in 1 year, and it's going to be continued in the broader space, decentralized media, soul-bound tokens, more around the DAOs. Just to give you an example, for example, there is one team out there that is working on the decentralized GitHub, where you can manage and eventually store your code repos in decentralized environment, and have DAOs to manage that code. It's just one example.
What are the advantages of having a DAO manage a project? Why can't one person just do it, or like a traditional hierarchy?
I mean, we all saw the failures of centralized decision-making systems. And I don't want to go back to FTX,
Hmm.
but it kind of was a little bit a one-man show, and um, it's just a bright example. It's not
Yes.
precise from my standpoint, but there are different things. People can go crazy. People can erase the code. People can do malicious things. People cannot be cautious enough about security, and tokens would be something would happen with the funds. So what those allow you to do is to move away from centralized decision making and potential misbehavior to decentralized decision making and consensus driven decisions, and hopefully more transparency, trust, and security as a consequence of that.
I understand. All right. Finally, what do you think is holding back the crypto space overall from recovering price rise?
The biggest factor, of course, is the global financial system with interest rates in the U.S. climbing up. It's just natural that people move away their money, as they've always done, by the way, for years and tens of years, from more speculative sectors, which, despite the great institutional adoption recently, the blockchain and crypto space is obviously a very risky space, just like the rest of the high tech, which fell pretty much together. So that's one big thing. I think the minute the situation reverses and the funds start coming back from more of defensive segments of investment into more risky segments, but with higher yields, I think we're going to see the reverse of that. So that's one. The
Hmm.
second one, of course, is adoption. We're still talking about 100 million users using blockchain/crypto more or less regularly. There are obviously more wallets out there, but the question is, are those active users or just, passive wallets created as part of their job? And that is being taken care of by constantly improving UI UX. I mean, I remember when I first tried some of the wallets and exchanges back in
Yeah.
2016 when I first tried. It was horrible. I mean, it was from UI UX standpoint, it, it's like internet of 1993, maybe something like that. Now we're in the internet of maybe 2000, with much friendlier
Yeah.
UI and better UX. So yeah, adoption and obviously change in the financial trends.
After the collapse of FTX, I remember in Malta, while that news was unfolding, everyone was talking about the rise of DeFi because people are starting to lose trust in centralized exchanges. And then people say, well, everyone should use a DEX instead, um, instead of a centralized exchange. Have you tried using a DEX? The UI is much more complicated than Binance. Yeah,
Of course, of course, of
that's
course.
the
Yeah, yeah.
problem. Yeah.
UI and UX is behind. It's catching up. You can now see, for example, decentralized exchanges. I'm helping one of the projects where you have order book capability. So that's something new. That it's not just a swap, but
But
you have.
what financial incentive? That's the good question. What financial incentive does a decentralized exchange, a DEX, have to improve the UI UX? Right? I mean, it's decentralized by
New
nature. They're not.
users, new users. Some people that are using Binance or some of the other good centralized exchanges uh, try dexes, and they just it's it's too simple. It's typically just a swap of one token against the other. You cannot work with an order book, and you cannot use more complex things like derivatives, etc. uh, as those things penetrate more functionality, and of course UI UX getting better visualization. Dex is basically looking and feeling like centralized exchanges, but with decentralization at its core, and no need, at least for now, for KYC, which is of course a big issue with some of the centralized exchanges.
Yes.
People, I mean, I have nothing to hide, but some people don't feel comfortable, putting their passport in there, and utility bills. Some people just want to swap quietly.
Well,
But
that's the other issue with the DEX, right? I mean, it's only a matter of time before the regulators start looking into the DEXs and say, hey, need better KYC because easy to launder money, easy to fraud people. Well, you can do that anywhere. I'm just saying it's not a regulated space, right?
It will fragment. It will be some of the DEXs, and I see the trend will voluntarily introduce some sort of KYC, maybe some simple stuff, and then get more and more sophisticated with compliance, get more and more sophisticated. And some of the DEXs will continue to remain as essentially some sort of DAOs, not being binded to any particular jurisdiction. So, like, how do you get to those? Like, who is behind? I mean, regulators know who is behind Uniswap, but who is behind an XYZ DEX that appears tomorrow, and you have no idea who the founders are, which country
That's
they
right.
settle in.
That's
So,
right.
like SEC or another regulator would simply have no jurisdiction and no physical capacity to control. The only thing you can do, and that we saw that happening with Tornado Cash, is you can order centralized repositories to remove the code. But even with Tornado Cash example, which was very, controversial in the industry, to put it softly, even there, some enthusiasts, came up with the new code on GitHub a couple of weeks later and saying that you cannot just remove the code. I mean, what's wrong with the code? The
Yeah.
code is just a code, and most of it is open source, by the way. So, like, what's wrong with open source code? So, yeah,
Or
some DEXs will,
hacks. Yeah. Hacks are a concern, of course.
yeah. So you'll see some DEXs kind of, moving towards compliance KYC, and some choosing to stay essentially anonymous and decentralized and not being linked to any jurisdiction.
All right. Generally speaking, last question, I'll let you go, Alex. Do you feel comfortable right now with your money, with your cryptos in a centralized exchange? And if not, what are you doing?
I obviously don't store substantial amounts on exchanges. Even the Binance, which I genuinely love, and I've been a customer for quite a while there, for many years. Like, I basically use it for exchange and maybe some small investments where you have good returns on small amounts. I really enjoy the Visa card from Binance. So I basically use all of the good things, but I wouldn't store, a significant amount of money. I mean, it's still in all true that if you don't own your keys, it's not your crypto, is still valid. So of course, people who've been long enough in the industry use cold wallets or even more sophisticated things. Yeah.
Great. Alex, I really appreciate you coming on Kitco. Welcome to the show, and thank you for your time today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, David. Enjoyed it.
And thank you for watching Kitco News. I'm David Lin. Stay tuned for more, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel.